Welcome Sanjay ji to the show on mediation, the global resolve. And to introduce you, he is the CMD of Paramount Communication, one of the leading cable manufacturers, and of course the past president of PhD Chamber of Commerce. So welcome to the show, sir. This is an interview come talk show series where we invite influencers and thought leaders like you, and we get your perspective on mediation and various aspects about mediation, whether it's been used by you or in your organization, and what are your thoughts on this. The whole initiative is to engage with all the stakeholders and sensitize them and make them aware that this ideally should be the first port of call to resolve your disputes, to reduce the frictions, whether these are in the workplace or these are about your commercial disputes with regards to agreements and contracts. Because at the end, we feel relationships are the key. They need to be preserved at all possible costs, and we should not get into a trap of a legal process if we have better solutions. So with that intent and with your permission, I would ask some questions to you, and then we'll have follow-ups as well. Thank you, sir. So first question would be the very basic one. What exactly, as per you, is mediation? What's your point of view? Do you think it is just a negotiation, or it is somewhat more than that?
You see, mediation as a practice must have been there for thousands of years. There's no question about that. Wherever there is dispute between any two parties, whether it be a commercial dispute or even any other type of dispute, including political disputes among nations, even you have had nations acting as mediators.
Right.
So I think mediation is something which is not something that is new. What is new really is the legal formal structure that is now being given to the process of mediation, which makes it probably gives it some more sanctity. And maybe makes it a bit more viable to happen. So I think from that point of view, yes, mediation as a concept has been there. It not only as a concept, it has been giving results also for thousands of years. But the fact is that the actual mediation that could happen probably would be much more if we try to do it on a more organized basis. So if the courts are now also, I think in many cases they are now asking for the parties to have a mediation before they.
Sure. Right.
See, this is very good, because if we all start getting accustomed to this for a country, especially for a country like India, where any matter in the court could last for decades, whatever it might be. You start with any type of litigation in which, for example, there are deadlines, very strong deadlines given by the government, still they fall by the wayside, whether it is section that check bouncing matters, whether it is your even insolvency matters, or any other matter for that, in that case. So practically, simply because of the overwhelming number of the cases and the shortage of judicial officers, this is the best way, no doubt.
Right, sir. So at times what happens, and as you also said, most of the time we start talking about mediation and we get to hear from other people, linking it to the overburden on the courts. Infrastructure is less and the cases are like in millions, which will take hundreds of years to get resolved. One concern continuously remains: is mediation only good because the courts are underwater, under pressure, or mediation has an inherent benefit because the very fact that the parties, if they are sensitized about the concept and they settle on their own on disputes which do not require a third party adjudication, they would never see the door of the court. They would never go to the court. So in the first place, I think as a concept, if it is pushed, if it is endorsed, if it is made known to the public in a much larger way, then on one side we are saying we'll reduce the burden on the court, but we'll actually prevent people from coming to the court. यानी
No,
आगे का
I agree with you totally. So there's absolutely no disagreement here. But one thing I would like to ask you is, are the courts not asking for mediation attempts between the litigators wherever it is feasible nowadays? Is that not become a precondition?
So mediation has found its way in some of the legislations like Commercial Courts Act, where they're saying pre-institutional litigation is a prerequisite now, right?
So it is a prerequisite wherever there is any commercial dispute. So you won't even have an arbitration. You'll have to go for a mediation.
You have to go for a mediation, and the mediation bill currently what we have.
When did this become applicable?
So this has been there for a while, but it has not taken off because, you know, again, the what should I say, the flaw or the, you know, the lack of foresight somehow prevents us from thinking through. And what happens is, like, you know, the kind of drafting what we have, it kind of, you know, gets into a tug of war of interpretation, because what happens, both the parties have to agree it's a voluntary exercise. Now, even in that particular Commercial Courts Act, it said that, you know, you will give an option to the other party, but if the other party does not want to come, right, then you can't help it.
No, but the court would be directing both, I believe, isn't it?
So what happens is, in current litigations where the parties have been, like, you know, struggling with litigation for quite a lot, you know, I mean, for years together, there have been scenarios where judges on their own, they have evaluated the cases or the strength and the merit, and they say, why you guys are fighting for years together? Why don't you try a mediation? But those mediations are court-annexed mediations. So which means that somewhere after a lot of struggle, a lot of frustration, a lot of vying for each other's blood, you know, wasting of time, money, effort, now they are being asked to try a mediation in a court-annexed mediation scenario.
This we are discussing a matter which has already been before the courts and it has been litigated.
Right.
Can the courts, as of now, instruct the litigators, whoever files a petition, to come back after they have done a mediation? Can it become compulsory? Has it become compulsory?
So it's the case-to-case scenario. There is no written law that a case which is before a bench, which is being heard, right? So there is nothing which kind of, you know, forces the judge at a point in time to force the parties to go and seek mediation, because they in any case have come for adjudication. They are in a dispute and they require a force of law through a judge. The law needs to be applied and we need to say who's right, who's not. Now, here the difference, what we are talking is pre-litigation mediation, which essentially means that the parties, when they have a dispute, when a conflict is about to become a dispute, why don't we try it out? Which means a private mediation, a separate process altogether. And what if we are able to resolve? To an extent,
I guess the sensitization that would be needed would be of a very different level, much higher level. If one is looking at a general sort of realization within the, forget about everything else, just within the business community, that if there is a dispute brewing, before any one of the two may approach the court, at least the other side may send, but then it has to be a mediation notice or something. There has to be a procedure, I think, even to that. Because if it is so unstructured, if there is no sanctity to it, till it gets signed, there has to be some sanctity to the process also. So from that point of view, I think the same way as parties in dispute are able to, you know, send an arbitration notice, for example, there be a mediation notice. So only then the one can have it built into the.
Agreed. So that is what is probably going to be addressed through the mediation law, the mediation bill, which is being, like, you know, discussed as we speak today. It's being discussed in the parliament, where they're saying that it should be the first port of call. And that is something which will give it more legitimacy and more formal mechanism to it. But as far as the notice is concerned or a SOP is concerned, somewhere we are still feeling that we are trapped, that unless until it's part of the law, then we should not try it out, because the beneficiaries are the people who are in dispute. What if there is no law? Because the whole concept of mediation is that you and me in dispute, we sit across, we resolve, we talk, we communicate, and we give and take, and we, like, you know, we are happy with whatever is the mechanism.
But you see, point is already happening. You see, that is already happening as I said again, for thousands of years, when people disagree, they also try and sit and make some sort of settlement. It's when they failed in that initial attempt, it is then that it is crucial that one introduces a formal mechanism by a process of law, so that it does not take up the time of the courts or even the arbitration time. It becomes a process in which if both the parties fail, only then they should be coming to the next. So,
agree. And a small difference here was that yes, it has been tried, but it's being tried in an unstructured way, which we normally call it a negotiation. Which means when the two parties are most of the time, because of the, I mean, should we call it ego, we should call emotions, whichever way. Or
sometimes it is only the break. That also happens.
Agree.
And so I think overall, if there is a structure to it, end of the day, we are not saying there are court hearings or anything. Let there be the minimum possible structure to it, so that at least a place, a date and a time can be decided by somebody that, look, you have to be present there and sit in this room. And that's what you can really do. Beyond that, if the parties do not deign to listen to the other side, nothing will happen.
Right.
But at least we have got them in a room.
Yes.
In a place. As part of a process which they would understand that if they arrive at some sort of a compromise through the process, it would have the sanctity of law also.
True, because the settlements normally through the mediation are purely based on the acceptability of each side. So unless until both the sides are agreeable in totality, to the extent they've agreed, that gets reduced as a settlement agreement. But the settlement agreement works as a monitoring document and less about the enforcement document. Because if it were to be enforced, that is where we would rather take it as a failed mediation, but it only serves a monitoring part, because the people on their own have said, I can do this much, and the other party says, I can do this much. Both of them are in agreement. And
ideally, in a mediation, since the mediator has actually mediated, in a way, a sort of equal satisfaction or equal dissatisfaction situation or balance is achieved. And then one hopes that after this has been done, the matter should be closed for all time.
Absolutely. Yes. Right.
That's what one expects.
Agreed. So the word here is balance is a better word rather than equal. Because through mediation, we are not imparting justice. Through mediation, we are saying, let's find a solution. Now, if your solution is you're happy taking 30% of what you thought is otherwise due.
Balance of happiness, balance of satisfaction, or even the other way, balance of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. Right. Okay. So a follow-up question, sir, here. Though in a way we have kind of to an extent addressed it, but I would still want to kind of ask you directly, why mostly people are inclined to settle disputes through courts instead of settling it through amicable ways? And there is a rejoinder to it. Have we got conditioned somewhere that a third party decides for us? They tell us what is right, what is wrong, and we happily accept it, and we might be cribbing in spite of our order in our favor, because the order won't be exactly the way you would want. So the losing party in any case is unhappy, but the party who's got an order in his favor also feels could have been better, I should have got this and that. So the success levels or the satisfaction levels are pretty low. Have we conditioned our minds something that let a third party?
In the case of any dispute, once a dispute has happened, the satisfaction levels are going to be exactly what you have described, whether you get it through a court case or through an arbitration or through a mediation. Even in a mediation, it's going to be the same. So, the end of the day, I would not really put much weight on, what's the level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Neither mediation nor arbitration nor a court order can be, I would say, more satisfactory to any of the litigants. I don't think it makes any difference. What makes a difference is the cost and the time. If you sit in a room and two people are able to arrive at an agreement, at least that can be a matter of satisfaction for both, that we did not spend that much time on litigating and did that much money on litigating. So I think that probably would be a level of satisfaction, which should be there.
Okay. And but the additional factor in mediation is that you get to choose how much you are willing to accept, or how much willing you are to let go. So that is, you are taking a call. So your satisfaction level should be slightly higher than arbitration, where the third party is deciding.
Hopefully.
Okay, got it. Do you think, sir, somewhere the legal fraternity is to be blamed, or at times we get to hear the lawyers have become the gatekeepers of justice, in the sense that they they see your case and they say, okay, we'll get you, we'll ensure you are winning, or we'll ensure a win for you, something like that. And then we get into a trap, because then what happens, there is adjournment, and there is an appeal in spite of an order, then go to the next court, next level, court of appeal, and finally apex court. Now, the statement continues.
I think nobody is so naive for the last at least 50 years, 70 years maybe, because we've cases that have hundreds of years. Everybody knows that anything going into the court can mean 5, 10, 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah.
Despite that, if a person chooses to go there, then to blame the lawyer, I don't think is the right spirit. I think it is the rigidity of the person who's going to the court. He's rigid on his views, and he says that I'll prove myself right, or I'll gain this benefit somehow, even if it comes after 10 years by doing this. I think that is the conditioning probably, and we are a very litigative nation, I think.
True.
And we have seen historically very, very poor people indulging in court cases where they should have been rather focusing on their, even poor farmers have multiple generations in litigation over small things. So I think that is something, if we talk of our conditioning or something built into us, maybe we are too litigating.
You're right that why blame someone when, as a beneficiary of a good order or a bad order, when you know that at the day end you have to take a calculative call, and a legal professional is just a medium or a conduit to ensure that the process.
Although the theory of law is very correct, that the lawyers are doing the best for their client, and the judge is doing his best to give a fair judgment. In practice, when there are on and off in cases that are dragging into 10 years, 20 years, nobody knows. Everybody is human. Whether a lawyer makes a mistake or a judge reads one page and thinks of it as something else, or gets confused and then passes an order, and then you are stuck. So there is no guarantee of justice still being done in such long dragged out cases. So in any case, that by itself is an argument for arbitration, and better than arbitration than mediation.
Mm-hmm. True. So in spite of the best efforts, because of either we call it burden or pressure or so many cases, and on average somebody says a judge at best can spend about 3.5 minutes on a particular case. Yes. And a civil case takes about 15 years on an average, right? And we are talking about some 3 million plus cases. It will take 300 years. So maybe all those are contributory factors, but at the end, what is important is, do the parties in dispute would always seek justice, or they thrive for, or they crave for solution? And are they same? I mean, they may or may not be.
You put your, absolutely, you're given the right, absolute right interpretation to the issue, whether you need justice or you need a solution. And litigative people, mostly, they think whatever is their version of justice is what they will want and nothing else. Whereas a solution would, of course, be to sit across the table, understand, and not only think what you want to, believe for yourself, but also look at the reality and then take a compromise. Mediation means compromise, basically. And compromise is then management of expectations.
Okay. What if I tell you mediation should mean adjustment, but arbitration or litigation should mean compromise? Because this is a third party diktat which you have to agree. So you have to compromise. But in mediation, you are willingly being part of the process. So that should have a milder term called adjustment. Would you agree?
No, I'm not.
Okay. So for you, it's a compromise all through.
It's all through a compromise. There's no issue to that. For the person, whether he is demand or whether his expectation is justified or unjustified, he's always fair in his own mind.
Well, yeah, that's what.
But for
Because
a third person, it might be unjustified. And the litigant, of course, the opposite side would, of course, be thinking that it's fully unjustified. But point is, whoever is agreeing to something is making a compromise in whatever forum. But what I am saying is, in this forum, at least it is voluntary and it's a part of a bargain also. Whereas that bargain does not happen in the case of a arbitration or in the case of a judgment court. So basically, as you said, it's distinct in the way that mediation would be a solution, not justice.
So that definitely is being positioned as one of the better takeaways from a mediation process, because you are a part of the process of a decision making. Whereas in either arbitration or in litigation, I mean, your hands are tied up, right? You just kind of submitted your claims, or you made
claims for the arbitrator or the judge to decide what to right, what he finds wrong.
As a third party, they are deciding what is right.
Cases make mistakes. That's why cases go from lower court to high court to Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
Right.
And just to add there, I mean, I'm sure like last couple of years, you've seen Ayodhya matter was, Supreme Court said, can Ayodhya be treated through mediation? The dispute. Can Shaheen Bagh dispute be treated through mediation? Now, these are community examples we got. Now, let's take the government example. We had issues with Vodafone, right? We had issues with Kinds, we had issues with BT. In spite of, the international arbitration and this and that, eventually it was, can we settle it? Could you take a step back? Can we take a step back? Can we look at can we sit across and discuss? This is nothing but a mediation, frankly. So what is currently happening, whether we take small case, a bigger case, now even a geopolitical scenario of Russia and Ukraine for that matter. Now, everyone by default, maybe we are wired that way or whichever way, but by default, we start looking at the provisions of law or the legal aspects to start with. And when there is a fatigue factor stepping in, after some time, we have spent money, energy, and we are drained out. And then somebody starts thinking, can we have an alternative? So, the likes of Vodafone and the government of India, for that matter, you do not have, any dearth of the best of the lawyers and, the best of everything with you. But even at that level, there was a discussion, okay, let's sit and talk and probably, agree. So with that context, do you see out of the four factors, the time, the cost, the uncertainty, and the relationship, out of these four, if I were to say, how do you prioritize what is important to you as a businessman? Because you run a company, there's a cost to everything.
I think time and time value of money. I think that is very important. As a commercial person, the time value of money is also very important. People just talk about time, but it's that same money. You realize after 1 year, and again in that there are two types of time values. One is just the financial cost or the interest cost, for example.
Right.
But the other is the opportunity cost of that same amount of money.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can turn that money around time and time over again, like absolutely.
That is much more important.
True. So in a way, you've said that because of the delays, it kind of adds to the cost. So opportunity lost and opportunity cost all put together, which means that element of uncertainty also weighs heavy. Now, what is your view on the relationships? Because if you go adversarial with a vendor, with a service provider, with any of your associate, a JV partner or anyone, do you think having filed a case against them, do you remain in talking terms? Do you explore other businesses? You normally can't, because then, people stop talking to each other. Now, would this be a happy situation? Is it not an opportunity loss?
But I'm not very sure that even if you're going through a mediation, as long as there is a dispute with anybody, you can't have a dispute on one hand and then you could be collaborating on two other things. Usually it doesn't happen.
Point taken. So the idea here was that if people are not even trying mediation. That means by default, as your example was, in arbitration, in litigation, you are going in for a longer period of uncertainty versus a scenario that you give to yourself for 90-day period. If the issues are somewhat complex, then what happens within those 90 days, you are still not raising the heat. What you're saying is, let's try it out. Now, if in 30 and 90 days, if you are able to resolve to an extent, or maybe the entire thing, then the losses, the opportunity cost, loss, everything put together is much more reduced, because in 90 days, you are either this side or that side. After that, you have kind of, taken a longer route, or the most, otherwise appropriate route, which is probably arbitration. So with that intent, again, mediation somewhere can be put ahead of the process. So if it becomes part of the culture in the organization. Now,
so I think I would strongly be inclined for this whole culture of mediation to take off. But my view is that it will seriously happen if we try and get it legislated somewhere.
True. Okay. So we move slightly on a different tangent, as in a different kind of a dispute, moving away from a commercial dispute. Of course, we continue to maintain that behind every dispute, there is an individual, whether we are talking about a community, a family, a business, or, a commercial or a workplace. Now, workplace dispute is often being ignored and not being given enough priority. Now, you run an organization, you are a CEO, MD of an organization, you have so many employees. Do you think the conflicts, which eventually have become disputes, or they have remained a conflict, but somehow it is an irritant which is not being properly handled, or there are not enough mechanisms to address, or we are doing enough for that? I mean, any view on this? Workplace disputes, if I were to call them?
You see, workplace disputes, let's broadly divide them between two types of workplace. One is the typical union dispute, unionized dispute, which happens at factory, shop floor worker level, or sometimes even at some higher salary levels also, when, for example, airline pilots work like union. So that's a typical union sort of a workplace matter. The other could be individual employees.
Yeah.
Being dismissed, challenging, saying we are discriminated, or even harassment, or all those sorts of things. That is a totally different basket. Now, unions matters, I think there is something which has been, I think, institutionalized in our country for so long. It's been all the pluses and minuses, all of us know, but there is a way that those unions things work. As far as the other workplace disputes are concerned, I think that is something which has come up in our country in the last 10, 20 years, maybe 20 years mostly. Because prior to that, probably a non-unionized staff or managers or whatever, they were never used to any sort of legal activism, which is there now.
Right.
So in such cases, again, I think, yes, mediation could be a very good idea. But then the sort of imbalance between the employer and the employee/ex-employee is so big.
Yeah.
That one would need to know how to bridge that gap so that a mediator is acceptable to both.
True. So fair enough. So I've been interacting with mediators who've created a niche for themselves by actually concentrating on the organizational disputes, as in intra-organization. So one group not going along with another group, a legal tussle or a ego tussle, somebody got promoted, the other did not, or somebody got dismissed, or somebody didn't get the actual salary hike and all. And then they try
a combination of HR issues, and only when HR issues gets out of hand does it become a dispute.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's the reason we try and put together HR, legal, and the finance people together. Because these are three different aspects. HR for sure is about management. and legal is because we need to avoid them getting out of control and getting into because a lot of people today think that we are aware of law, we know our rights and all that, but then they then they become myopic. So it's like I versus them, though they lose out on the very basic premise that they are part of the same organization and they're not doing any service to the cause by going against. So that is where people have started putting SOPs and actually not letting the situation go out of hand, because it goes out of the hand and it sets a precedence, a wrong precedence. If you bow down to a unreasonable demand, then you are probably sending a wrong message to the rest of the people who will get ideas over the period, and the vice versa also doesn't work. So the best is to make it confidential, right, through a mediation mechanism, try and resolve it or bridge the gap. And again, the whole aspect of mediation is a bit of give and take. So it's not always the money coming and going to each other to resolve the dispute. It's not about compounding the offense.
So I think we would need some ideas, some fresh ideas as to how to make this process embedded into
True.
organizational.
Right. So we do interact with HRs on this thing. So I mean that was the whole point, that workplace mediation for the workplace dispute is something which has not got enough focus, but a lot of productive time of the organization and the decision makers, right from the CEO, CFO, and the GC, it is being spent unnecessarily. So that's one area. In your organization, sir, have you come across these things and you somehow kind of settle on its own, or you think something better can be done which is more formal?
I think mostly I think we have been dealing through such matters through our HR only. We usually do not want things to go to a legal.
Sure. Right.
Maybe it happens very rarely, but we try to close it, shut it off as best possible.
And there are always thresholds of tolerance, I would say, no-go situation. So you can always be adjusting and flexible and accommodating. But I'm sure the norms and the disciplines have to still be adhered to. So great. So last couple of questions. First of all, during COVID, do you think that this was one good test for all of us, where it was practically next to impossible to figure out as to who was at fault? Because it just, hit everyone together and it had a domino effect. And one party, creating or getting into a default led to so many other defaults. So whether it was a tenancy issues, landlord versus tenants, or these were simple agreements not being adhered to and force majeure being talked about a lot of all the time. So do you think COVID has actually taught us that there is a better way to resolve, and at times it's not necessary to keep finding faults with each other? Maybe makes sense to sit across.
I think COVID, brought in a concentrated assault of such disputes in huge numbers, or a flood of such disputes happening. Landlord-tenant disputes, non-execution of a contract dispute, all these things. So, and everybody knew that already the courts are not working. On top of that, current cases are not being taken up. You also go to that same court to take 20 years. So maybe people did get a bit sensitized. But I really doubt whether mediation as a process became more popular during this. I don't know. That's for you, Tim.
Okay, because a lot of people who've been talking, and we have webinars and we have sessions on force majeures and how we should look at settlements and all that. So there was some sensitization. What is the challenge though remains that after the courts are open, do we go back to our basics, or we have learned from from a particular scenario, and then we would rather behave a bit more than that? But anyway, okay. So maybe the last one. What else you think with regards to mediation? Now, you again, I would say, as an entrepreneur, as a promoter, where you have a company to run, and you have commercial disputes and you have workplace, and of course there is a potential in your circle. You would be seeing the family disputes. What else should happen with regards to mediation as a concept, where the acceptance, endorsement becomes much easier? One is the mediation bill, which is being discussed in the court, in the parliament as we speak. But in terms of sensitization, awareness, what else can be done and should be done?
I think the only part of sensitization which needs to be done is to make people more aware of the legal provisions as the law comes into force. Other than that, everybody has enough common sense while entering into a dispute to know that it's always better to settle without going to the court. What is really important for each such person or entity to know is that now there is a legal framework available. So I think that is what is going to be crucial. Everybody knows that a dispute means 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, black hole. So it's not, I don't think anybody needs sensitization on that. Despite that, people go to the court because they say we have no order. So you only have to basically make them aware that this alternative is available.
So legality is something which you kind of, emphasize.
This thing is to be done and it is legal, because the other side, if there's a dispute, I'll say, okay, I'm willing to do that, but is the other fellow going to do it? And how can I force him? So it's only the law which can force, right?
Okay, fair enough. And so what are your comments or views with regards to a mediator? So in case you have a dispute and you were to look at a mediator, how comfortable would you be? One is the process. So we discussed about the process, and then there's a person who drives the process called a mediator. And so whether there are issues or apprehensions in terms of the quality or the availability or where to go and where to search for them, something like that.
I think that's very important, because, in mediation, as opposed to the typical way of dispute resolution, which happens or used to happen between any two antagonists, was rather an arbitration, but an informal arbitration in which both sides were having confidence on the arbitrator. That was a typical model of things working, and it was a very small percentage where people would agree to an arbitrator in the first place, a common arbitrator, right? Legal process has given now a system whereby you get an arbitrator. That's it. So similarly, now I believe another really important part of the act or the system of the government would be to make a formal system in which there is some sort of a pre-qualification for mediators, and there are certain set of guidelines for them how they have to act, so that the mediator themselves do not end up misusing their authority.
Right.
So I think these are the sort of things that need to be sorted out. If arbitration is a reasonably well accepted norm, so mediation would also become a reasonably well accepted norm, provided we have all the norms for that also.
Norms, right? Okay. So guidelines, norms, SOPs, if they are in place, then you think the uptake can be much faster.
So let's say there is a panel of 100 mediators available.
Right.
So two people can sit and say, okay, open the book, and which one do you agree?
Agreed.
Something like that.
Sure. Right. And so last bit, would you be willing to give 30 days to try out mediation in the next dispute which you come across within your space, or you think 90 days or we'll see
days very well. Even 90 days is not a bad idea, considering the details that happening before.
Okay.
90 days is not a bad idea at all. The only problem will be that when there is a dispute, am I the one to say mediation or the other guy to say mediation? And if I say mediation, if he refuses, well, what's the situation?
That is true. It does, become a question which is normally asked, because one thing is very clear, it's a voluntary process. So if both the parties are not willing, then of course, as of now, it goes against the grain of mediation that we cannot force. The use of force, coercion, of course, goes against the very concept. But who says we should not take him as a vulnerable or a weaker party? This is just an attempt
to
explore.
Also be then sensitized to the trade at large first, and then maybe to other stakeholders also, as to how one should, what is the standard guideline for initiating a mediation.
Sure.
That would be helpful, right?
Right. Fair enough. Right, sir. So I think that was a small set of questions which I had. Anything you would want to say, about this concept generally? So,
No, I
we've
think
had our
I'm
discussion. Yeah.
absolutely, I'm very, very positive about the concept, or rather, I welcome the concept actually gaining more ground and becoming more entrenched. So this would definitely be of great help to anybody who's somehow got into a dispute. No doubt about it.
Okay, so I think on one side we should wait for the bill to take some formal shape and then come out, and then we'll have debates on that, and would definitely want to hear your views again on this thing. In the interim, let's all take a pledge to the extent that we can. We should try and look at possibilities of resolution without going to the court, and if not, then of course that's a fait accompli for all of us, I guess. Right, sir? Thank you. Thanks a lot for sparing time.
Thank you.
And with this, it does encourage us to kind of continue this exercise. So lovely. Thanks a lot. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.